Spider-Man and his amazing friends.
Do you guys have a piece of media, whether that be like a book or a TV series or even a movie, that you were huge fans of when you were younger, but then as you got older and became an adult, you kind of just look back on it and realized, yeah, this isn't as good as I remembered it to be? Well, one time when I was in high school, me and my best friend were watching Star Wars, and we were like, hey, let's throw on Attack of the Clones. And about 20 minutes into it, we just kind of looked at each other and we both realized, like, we have no idea what this is about. And we realized that we didn't like it either, but that's a whole nother video for another day. But when I was really young, I have memories of watching on Fox Kids Network Spider-Man and His Amazing Friends. But I was born in the early 2000s, so I obviously grew up watching the animated series from the 90s. I don't really remember a whole lot about Spider-Man and His Amazing Friends, other than the fact that there was Iceman and Firestar, of course, and I thought I liked it. But after rewatching it now and doing research for this video and this tier list that I'm doing with all the Spider-Man animated shows, I gotta say, it does not hold up as well as I thought it would. So before we get into Spider-Man and His Amazing Friends, we of course have to talk about Spider-Man 1981. Now, upon first glance, you might think that both of these series are connected, and I thought they were too going into this. I thought Spider-Man 1981 came out, and then like later in 1981, Spider-Man and His Amazing Friends came out. But actually, upon doing research, both of these series premiered on the exact same day. Now, what does that mean? I have no idea. I don't know why they did that. So are they connected? Is one just a solo story about Spider-Man, and then one is a story about Spider-Man and his amazing friends? Kinda. They're not canonical together. They are not in the same universe. Even though in Spider-Man and His Amazing Friends, there's a flashback scene of an episode with Magneto from the 81 series. And they have the same voice actor for Peter Parker, if my memory services me well, and the animation and art style is the exact same. So, no, even though they were released on the same exact day, and they have flashbacks from one series referring to the other, and the same animation, and the exact same intro, one just says Spider-Man,
Spider-Man.
and one just says Spider-Man and His Amazing Friends.
Spider-Man and his amazing friends.
So no, they are not, one is not a sequel to the other, and they are not connected, even though it doesn't make any sense why they're not, but nonetheless. Before we get into that, please consider subscribing. Only 97% of you guys that watch the videos are actually subscribed, so please consider subscribing. It just helps the channel, helps me grow, helps me reach a larger audience, and just lets me know that you guys like the videos I'm making and want me to make more. That being said, if there's any ideas that you guys have after this tier list that I'm doing is complete, let me know. I'm open to ideas. But let's just get into 1981 Spider-Man. First thing I want to say about this series is, in a post-Spectacular Spider-Man world, and in a world where the 90s animated series came out as well, this show doesn't do anything new and anything groundbreaking. If you were to flash back all the way to the 1980s, I bet I would have loved this show when it first came out. It's got very, like, obviously to me now it's retro vibes, but it fits right in with the art style of like Super Friends, which is actually what I think inspired Spider-Man and His Amazing Friends, as they were trying to reach the like DC Justice League Super Friends kind of vibe. But that being said, the art style for both series, especially just the standalone Spider-Man series, is pretty nice. It holds up. It's a whole lot better than the art style and the animation, especially from the 60s Spider-Man, where when Spider-Man would swing in that, it would just be like a stagnant line and he would go across the screen. Whereas in this, it's actually like liquid, it's fluid. You can actually see Spider-Man going back and forth. So within those 20 years, the animation from the 60s to the 80s series is phenomenal. It's a whole lot better. But once again, comparing that to everything else I have on this tier list, like Ultimate Spider-Man, Spider-Man Unlimited, the animated series from the 90s, even the new animated series as well, and of course Spectacular Spider-Man, all of these shows are leagues above the 1981 series and Spider-Man and His Amazing Friends. So I can't give it too much credit, but I also really don't want to knock it down, because what it was at the time was probably really successful and really big. Speaking of what it was at the time, especially for the standalone Spider-Man series, there is always constant quips and like subliminal messaging to the kids. Not anything weird like conspiracy theorists will always say about subliminal messaging, but Spider-Man will be swinging by and he'd be like,
well, it's a good thing I took my vitamins. That's how I was able to defeat the bad guy.
Stuff like that goes on all the time, and you can just tell the era that this is in, and I feel like is really stuck into like the early 80s, 70s type of vibe. But because of that, the character designs I feel like are really strong, except for Doc Ock. I do not like his design. I like the colorways, like the classic yellow and green, but just something about his like pointy goggles I was not a fan of. But character design wise, you have characters like the Lizard, Vulture, Sandman that are very, very similar to their comic book counterparts, and honestly, I really like them. They fit the time period that this show is based in. Speaking of the time period that the show is based in, Peter Parker, Betty Brant, which Betty Brant is the only love interest in this show. There's no MJ or Gwen, which I don't really know why that happened, but that was a unique decision they did. And Peter's always constantly having to do, you know, like Peter Parker stuff or Spider-Man stuff and make the hard decision to not go out on dates with Betty. He's always being flaky, but Betty Brant and Peter Parker, for the time period that they're in, their clothing is actually one of the things that I noticed that stuck out. Like in Spectacular Spider-Man or the animated series, like in Spectacular Spider-Man, he has baggy pants on, which is more like a 2000s sort of thing, or the 90s series, he's got a collared shirt. Peter in this has like a bright blue, like yellow and blue sweater and like jeans and turtleneck outfit and stuff. Very, very like late 70s when this was probably being like animated type of vibe, which I thought was pretty cool. This series as a whole has a whole lot of safe storytelling narratives when it comes to like the overall plots of the show. The two that stuck out to me that were the most bizarre was the Mysterio and the Doctor Doom plot, which, by the way, I'm going to get this out right now. Doctor Doom for the Spider-Man 81 series is the main bad guy. Like, we get characters like Magneto that show up as a villain before the Green Goblin. And the Green Goblin only has one episode where he has this like comic book amnesia thing from a battle they once previously had, where he remembers who like Spider-Man is, that he's Peter Parker. It's not that good. But Doctor Doom is the main villain overall, and he is constantly like brainwashing people, not through like any magical powers, but like he's trying to take over and be president, either president of the United States or like dictator of the world. Don't really remember, but he's trying to like come into power, and he is using like his propaganda and his persuasiveness, and he gets people like J. Jonah Jameson, which shows this like stark contrast between J. Jonah Jameson and Peter. Is like Peter's always trying to do whatever he can to be Spider-Man and do the right thing, and J. Jonah Jameson, like the blink of an eye, like switches and is on Doctor Doom's side, which I know J. Jonah Jameson is always against Spider-Man, but something about this adaptation really shows like the direct contrast between the two characters, which I personally enjoyed. But you have characters like Doctor Doom and Mysterio that have these arcs that feel really out of place. One of the most interesting ones and like the most memorable one that I have was the Mysterio episode where, you know, instead of Mysterio doing his normal like smoke and mirrors stuff, I kid you not, he brainwashed people and like mind controlled them, like with actual powers, not like the persuasiveness of Doctor Doom. He mind controlled people with rock and roll music.
With a clever little touch of my own added in.
It looks like something straight out of the SpongeBob movie where Plankton puts on like the helmets and like mind controls people where they're like walking like this. It is insane. And his whole goal is to destroy Spider-Man. And as soon as he like gets the mob to put their hands on Spider-Man, you'd think they're gonna like curb stomp him and like get him all together and just kick him and kill him and stuff. But no, they just pick him up and like deliver him to Mysterio. It's one of the cheesiest and goofiest like Spider-Man episodes I've ever seen.
Must destroy Spider-Man. Aha.
And it was nothing to do with the character of Mysterio. Mysterio was just like a stand-in because Mysterio sometimes plays tricks on people like that. But normally it's like smoke and mirrors and all this crazy like theater stuff, which there's a little bit at the very end where he explains his backstory of being like a theater person, but it was just insane. The main thing I want to say taking away from these episodes is there's a lot of story arcs that are very like cut and dry to like the standard Spider-Man media level. And then there's a whole lot of stuff that's just doesn't make sense, like the Doctor Doom and Mysterio thing. Last thing I want to say about Doctor Doom is you can tell that he was very much inspired by Darth Vader, especially with the way he sounds and how deep his voice is with like the helmet and everything. And like obviously he has the helmet and the cape and other adaptations. But you can just tell like where this is in like the 80s and 70s and stuff going on with Star Wars. Doctor Doom being the main villain for this Spider-Man series is inspired by Darth Vader.
It's the wall crawler.
Yes, I've been expecting him.
It's insane. I like Doctor Doom. I don't think he's like ever a main Spider-Man villain to my knowledge, so that was a very interesting decision. Gonna put Spider-Man 1981 on the tier list. I'm just gonna put it at C tier. There's not a whole lot about this show other than the iconic like transition sound. And I don't want to look it up to see if like a Batman with Adam West did this or if it was this series, but the transition, like, I'll put it on screen right now and like play a clip of it.
Nutcase is still on the loose.
This is one of the most iconic, unless it didn't come from this series. If it did not come from 1981 Spider-Man, please let me know. But the like transition between the scenes is insane. It is so incredibly iconic. I have to put this at C tier. There's not a whole lot about this series that I think is groundbreaking. Like, Peter just gets thrust right into action all the time. Aunt May hates Spider-Man, all this sort of stuff. So I'm not a huge fan of just this series overall. It doesn't do anything that I would say is like groundbreaking, especially in today's media landscape with other Spider-Man media. I'm just going to put this on C tier with Spider-Man Unlimited. You can put it on in the background. It's not a bad show by any means. It just does not stack up compared to anything else on this list. So Spider-Man and His Amazing Friends follows the story of Peter Parker, the exact same Peter Parker from the other series, but it's for some reason not connected to this one. It's so confusing. Peter Parker, Bobby Drake, Iceman, and Angelica Jones Firestar. And you might be asking, if you're not familiar with the series, who Firestar is. Well, right back, actually, it's over there. She was actually iconic enough to make it into the UCS Davy Bugle Lego set. Firestar, they wanted her to be the Human Torch, but due to like behind the scenes contractual obligations and licensing issues and stuff, they could not put the Human Torch in this series. And why? Like, I get the fire and ice contrast, but fire, ice, and spiders doesn't really make a whole lot of sense. But you would think, okay, Firestar is just the Human Torch, but as a girl. But instead, I did a whole deep dive on her character. Like, she used to be a member of the X-Men during the Uncanny days. She was an Avenger at one time. She's shown up in other Spider-Man media that's not canonical to this, but like winks back at this series. Very, very interesting, whole lot of stuff. But her powers are actually like microwave radiational powers, where instead of like producing fireballs and like turning herself on fire like how Johnny Storm does and throwing fireballs and all that stuff, instead, she irradiates the energy and like fields around her to put fire around her, and like she will catch stuff on fire. So if you have like my water bottle, right? Johnny Storm would like throw a fireball at it. She would just make it catch on fire. So it's a whole different set of power skills, but very surface level. Boom, fire is hot, right? So she's a fire mutant. But this series follows the three of them living out of Aunt May's house, where they have what can only be a ripoff of the Super Friends Batcave, where all this stuff, like the furniture, flips on its side to reveal all their stuff, like all their gear and computers and stuff. Very gimmicky. But this series just follows the three of them trying to do their homework, like struggling to do like the standard Peter Parker superhero life of fighting villains and then doing their homework and completing college and stuff and going on date nights and stuff. There's just not a whole lot about this series that stands out to me. The only thing is Video Man. There are a lot of characters in this show, similar to the new animated series. They just came up with original characters for this series, but there was a whole lot of characters in the show that I just felt like were utter misses, except for Video Man. And one of the only like core memories I have of watching this show when I was younger was the Video Man episode where he sucks in Peter Parker, Flash Thompson, Bobby Drake, Iceman, and Angelica Jones Firestar into a video game, and the whole point is it's like this retro arcade video game where like if he can kill them in the video game, they'll kill them in real life, and then he can like jump out and then take over New York because he knows he has no chance fighting them outside of the video game. And then Flash Thompson is actually the one that saves the day. Pretty interesting episode. Some of the episodes, it's like standard Spider-Man stuff. They're fighting regular villains. The costume design and character designs are like almost identical to the series beforehand, so nothing I can say about this show to give it enough praise to step over the just straight up 81 Spider-Man series. But going back to the episode structure and how it works is there'll be some episodes that are very like by the book standard Spider-Man and his three friends, that's a ripoff of the Super Friends, fighting these villains. And then there'll be like weird episodes where it feels like you're not even watching anything Spider-Man related. And I don't know the reason behind this. Like, for example, there's episodes where they're fighting these like weird animal beast hybrids, or they go to outer space. They just do a lot of stuff that isn't necessarily like bad, but it just is not entertaining, at least in my perspective. You know, the whole reason I do the list is it's like my opinion. So if you liked it, that's awesome. I enjoyed the series. I just didn't like love it. Some of the best parts of the series though are like the Iceman and Firestar origin stories. Those are pretty cool. So if you're going to watch the series, I'd recommend checking those out. One thing, I didn't really know where to put this in, but Firestar is not MJ. She's her own character. And like little me, when I was watching this series, I'm like, Angelica Jones, that's MJ, because like J is Jones, MJ. But turns out there's no other love interest for Peter Parker. There's a little bit of an on again, off again with Angelica Jones, but at the end of the series, Spider-Man dates an inhuman alien, and like that's where the series ends. Like the Firestar and Iceman go off with the X-Men, and then Peter is essentially like, it cuts to black with her and him, like with Peter and this like inhuman alien. It's so weird. It comes out of left field, comes out of absolutely nowhere. So I would check it out if this sounds interesting to you. The best thing about this show by far is the intro. I love like the Spider-Man and his amazing friends. Like that is extremely iconic to me. I think that's the best part of this series. In theory, this show would work really well if he had other team members. Like, I don't really like the trio idea unless it's a trio like the big three in DC, Batman, Wonder Woman, and Superman, where you know that they're going to mesh and work well together. Why are we making a series of the big three, or like a trio with Firestar with fire powers, Iceman with ice powers, and Spider-Man with spider powers? Like, two of those could work very well, having like a fire and ice dynamic and combo. And there's even episodes, I believe it was an episode where they were trapped with Kraven, where Firestar was constantly being like wet with water and being frozen, and Iceman was constantly being heated up. Like, those episodes are interesting and that concept is interesting, but why are we pairing them with Spider-Man other than to just get Iceman more exposure, because he was already popular at the time? But I don't know why and like what the creative decision behind all of this was. So I can't really boast too much about this show. I think this series would work better as a Spider-Man and Friends sort of adaptation. Like, yeah, he has his two amazing friends with him, but Ultimate Spider-Man does a really good job even early on of like establishing, okay, this is going to be a Spider-Man and Friends-esque show. So when we're introduced to multiple different characters throughout that series, it doesn't seem like it's coming out of nowhere. Only having Spider-Man, Iceman, and Firestar team up together as the core like trio throughout the series, it just makes it feel less impactful when the core trio works with other people like the X-Men and Captain America. It makes me almost want and like long for a Spider-Man and Friends TV show with this like 70s, 80s retro aesthetic. That's where I think this series like succeeds at, is being a Spider-Man and Friends sort of narrative when they're going on different wacky adventures. But when you're constantly going through the high highs and low lows of this show, like doing drastic left and right decisions of not knowing tonally what this show wants to look like, half of this show feels like it's this grounded Spider-Man story, and then there's this other side that's like pulling, trying to drag out this show to become this like Super Friends, Spider-Man and Friends sort of show. And I feel like there's a loss of identity, and there's like an identity crisis with this show with that happening. I don't think that this show really succeeds as a whole, but I think there's a lot of potential with this show, and it is a fun show. Just stacking it up on a tier list, or even just comparing it to other animated cartoons that are out there, superhero cartoons that is, I think that's where this show falls apart, is when it's stacked up against and compared to other series. As a standalone show with its own narrative, this is an enjoyable watch, but again, I don't think it's anything groundbreaking. I don't think it's anything super special to write home about. One more cool thing about this series is that at the time, Stan Lee did not do like the voiceover narration, but after the popularity and the success of the show, later on when it went to like VHS or DVD, or just when they aired past like previous episodes on the network, Stan Lee was actually brought in to do the voiceover for the narration, which I think is pretty cool, and RIP Stan Lee. But yeah, that's really all I have about this series. The way it ends isn't anything crazy. It's like the X-Men come in and it kind of just abruptly ends, but there is a comic where Merlin is like traveling interdimensionally, going to different universes, and he kills Spider-Man, Firestar, and Iceman. And I think the exact same thing happens with Spider-Man Unlimited as well. So I don't really know. I wouldn't like this. I mean, if this series gets picked up in the future, that'd be cool, but I'm championing, obviously, for Spectacular Spider-Man and the 90s animated series. I do think it's cool how, like, looking back, this is one of those smaller shows, but it did have an impact on Spider-Man culture as a whole. Like I said, with the UCS Lego set, Iceman's not in there because he's more of an X-Men character, but Firestar, who was an original character created purposely for this show, because they couldn't get a Johnny Storm. She's in this, so like obviously her popularity has risen up. Like I said, she's an X-Men at one point because she does have mutant powers, and then she was even an Avenger for a little bit. So the show was successful. I just didn't find a whole lot of enjoyment out of it, which is sad because I always thought in my mind, and really when I was going to make this list, I'm like, okay, Spectacular Spider-Man in the 90s series, those are S tier. Obviously, everything else I hadn't seen besides Spider-Man Unlimited, and I know that show's not the best, but it holds a soft spot in my heart. But I was like, where am I going to put Spider-Man and His Amazing Friends? And I was thinking A tier, and then I watched this series specifically for this video. It's not A tier. I'm going to put it either at a C or a D plus. I'll see what I end up deciding to do, but I did enjoy it purely for the nostalgic reasons, and it is a little bit of a different show. But yeah, that's really all I have regarding this series. Nothing too crazy, but it's a good show to put on the back. Actually, I'm just going to put it at C tier because C tier is the middle of the line. So like, I don't consider anything in C tier to be bad, but I don't consider anything in C tier to be amazing. So kind of like what I said with Spider-Man Unlimited, you can put both of these series on in the background while you're like vacuuming or doing the dishes or whatever. And it's a good, I like the retro vibe. It's pretty standard, nothing groundbreaking. If you want to watch better Spider-Man series or better Spider-Man content, there's a whole lot more out there. But yeah, just going to put these two at C tier. That's all I have left for this video. The only two series we have left are Spider-Man 2017 and then like the OG 1960s Spider-Man. So I don't know which one I'm going to do next. I haven't seen either of them. I've only seen clips. I know that Spider-Man 2017 isn't regarded as being the best, but there's like 3 or 4 seasons. So that'll take me a while to get through and probably be a really long video. So let me know which one you guys recommend me covering next. But that's really all I have for now. Thank you guys so much for watching. Like I said earlier, if you haven't subscribed, please consider subscribing. It just helps the channel grow, helps me know that you guys like the videos that I'm making, and I'll keep making more because of it. But that's really all I have for now. Let me know what you guys think of the video. Let me know what you guys think of Spider-Man 1981 and Spider-Man and His Amazing Friends. Let me know if you've never seen it. Let me know if you hate it. Let me know if you love it. But that's all I have. Take care of yourselves. Bye.